Hi, I'm your host Satwan, and welcome to this episode with Juliana Pereira from Trust Me. If you'd prefer to listen to the audio version of this podcast, simply visit thepayments.show in your web browser, and you'll get a list of all the episodes along with links to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you would like a PDF transcript of this episode, please visit thepaymentsshow.substack.com where you can download it. Thanks and enjoy the episode. Juliana, welcome to the Payment Show.
Hi, happy to be here. Nice to meet you.
You too. Where are you joining from today in the world?
I am in New York City, in Manhattan.
Okay. You're headquartered there?
Yes, so our company, Trust Me, is headquartered here in New York. We have an office in Midtown.
Okay, fantastic stuff. Well, I'm going to dive straight into it. I'll give you an intro. I think it's going to be an exciting episode. So, Juliana, you're the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Trust Me.
Yes.
And your company provides end-to-end security solution to protect businesses from things like cyberattacks, internal collusion, human error, and ensuring payments go to the right place. Would that be an accurate description of what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. So we work with mostly large businesses, but really businesses of any size, but enterprise businesses really see the biggest benefit from our product to do exactly that, to eliminate those cyber attacks, internal collusion, protect their supply chain of vendors, and avoid financial errors, which are ubiquitous within finance processing, business to business. And that's what we do, and we ensure that they do it right. And we always talk about sending the funds to the right person at the right time to the right place, just getting it right.
Well, as someone who likes watching documentaries, I'm going to love talking to you about internal collusion. You must have some amazing stories.
Oh, yeah. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I want to set the scene for the audience to introduce your product, because it very clearly states in your marketing that Trust Me is not just a security product. It protects finance companies from payment fraud. Just to set the scale of what numbers we're talking about, you've got stats showing that $50 billion was lost on business email compromise between 2013 and 2022. That's staggering. 1 to 3% of companies' budgets are lost every year to financial errors. That's very high. I didn't expect that. 84% of enterprises were hit by B2B payment fraud attacks in 2022. And even the government doesn't escape. So I learned from your website that $247 billion was lost, according to the US Government Accountability Office, for federal payment errors. So that's a staggering amount of money.
Yeah, that was a specific story in the news for sure. And actually, for the 84% stat, that actually I just found out last week has been updated. It's 80% of enterprise businesses for 2023, so stands at about the same amount of 80%. But also 41% of businesses suffered losses from fraud in 2023 of the companies that were surveyed. Yeah, so these are high numbers.
Yeah. Massive numbers, yeah. And would love to talk through step by step in your solution how you basically could help in all those scenarios through so you've got a very modular solution from what I've read into it. So maybe I could pick on a couple, and feel free to pick something else if you like. Just a couple of things that really interested me were, the payment approval workflow, which sounds kind of dull in and of itself. But your software helps to uncover vulnerabilities in the workflow, detecting suspicious signals and things like that. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's where, when you take a step back and you look at the B2B payment process. So when we think about it, when we talk about end to end, what does that really mean? It really means from the first email moment of communication with a vendor who reaches out to you or you reach out to them, all the way through to building that relationship, signing a contract, getting them onboarded, uploading an invoice, getting all the approvals to then release the payments to that vendor once they've delivered the goods and services, right? Like there's an entire chain that happens there in the workflow. And so when we talk about a modular solution, really there's all these different pieces of the solution, but you need to think about it holistically as a full solution, right? So when we're thinking only about the approval process, that's the part where there's a chain of people or different teams or people on different teams that are approving the invoice, making sure that it's correct, right? That the right person is going to be paid the right amount to the right company. Now, in order to do that and to know and feel confident that you are approving an invoice that is real and that's you're going to pay the right company, how do you know, how do you really know that it's the right vendor, right? Like how can you know from an invoice that you receive that that's the right invoice and it's not a fraudulent one and you're paying the right person? Well, what we do is with every vendor that you work with, we build what we call a baseline or a digital fingerprint. And so we look at all the communication in the past you've had with that vendor, not just the tone of the communication, but the people involved in the communication. How often are you paying them? Are the invoices being sent? What do the invoices look like? And, how is that being paid? Everyone who needs to approve it and when you have to make the payment, all of those details. I mean, it's hundreds of data points. So that if we see an anomaly or a deviation from that baseline, we can flag it. So let's say all of a sudden someone comes in and says, hi, Nancy no longer works in the finance department. And now my name is Sasha, and so here's my information. 2 days later, Sasha sends an email saying, hey, can you update your banking information because we've changed it. We now want to be paid to this bank account. Like those are two isolated incidents, right? Like they're two data points that individually might not seem like a big deal, but when you go tracking that and then you receive the invoice and something looks off on the invoice, the amount is twice the amount you usually pay that vendor, or the other information is different, or the formatting looks bizarre. All of those things we can flag in our system to then be able to say like, okay, you need to review this because there's something off here about this invoice or of what's going on here. It looks like there was a business email compromise, or it looks like the wrong invoice was sent, or something's up. And so then we can provide that sort of surgically tell our partners that we work with, our clients, you look into this area here of this payment flow of the approval process. But even before that, to the emails that led up to the invoice being sent and then being approved. So the approval payment flow is really kind of that one piece where you have all the different people involved. And so because there's so many siloed systems, so many people that might have to approve an invoice, all of that requires some automation, and it requires support and also visibility so you can see who's approving and when, to really make sure that that invoice follows the right process and that different controls aren't being circumvented, that sort of thing. And so that's everything that we can kind of see there to be able to flag if there's issues, right?
Yeah. So that sounds amazing, but I want to dig in under the hood. So in a typical organization where you've mentioned, somebody in accounts might get an email and then there's siloed people in approvals and banking and payments. That would basically mean, according to my understanding, that you're going to have software agents deployed in Outlook on people's desks and on the servers and everywhere else, is in addition to you hooking into that company's banking flow as well. Is that accurate?
So in how we integrate?
Yeah. Because everything you said sounds great, but I'm just trying to think through logically how you would actually implement that.
So that's an excellent question. So as you aptly mentioned before, we sit at the confluence of cybersecurity and fintech, right? So we are you can call us a fintech company that, provides a cybersecurity product, or a cybersecurity company that provides a fintech product. We're on both sides of that. So when we have conversations with treasurers, accounts payable, finance people, inevitably we always bring in, on their side, they'll bring in their chief information security officer, right? Because you don't just want to give up all your email access or whatever. However, if you think about it with any company, you already have a number of tools that you've integrated into your email and other parts of your tech stack to provide security and to protect it, right? So that's not anything new. So when we work with the security team to do that piece with the email and across the entire process, we're plugging into already protocols and that they've already run before. Like, this isn't anything new. And certainly we provide the flexibility that if you say, okay, we only want you to have access to specific email inboxes, then that's great. You can give us that access or not, however much access you want to give us. So it's not a fully invasive thing, and it's also nothing out of the ordinary. This is something that you every company has a lot of tools that are doing this already. Not like ours, but for different reasons. But that type of integration is what I mean. Like, that's already quite common. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
At a high level, yeah. So definitely, obviously, you've got to be fully integrated with the IT team at the organization. I was thinking more at a nuts and bolts, because there's just so many parts there. I'm just trying to understand how the software, certain parts are really easy to detect, like if you're in the banking flow, for example. But I'm just trying to understand from the email, the business email compromise, money lost through that is huge. And I'm just trying to understand how that works actually more than anything.
So with our system, we can have, we use it as one central location to be able to look at all that information and be able to aggregate and analyze all of that, right? Like I'm not going to speak to the specific APIs or integration pieces, but the understanding being that there is obviously a tech stack, and that we layer on top of that and integrating into all those pieces to be able to then connect the dots, as we call it, connecting the dots with data is what we like to call it, across all of those systems. Because that's the biggest challenge, is that you have systems like, it's not just the email, right? Like BEC, you've got email, you've got ERPs, you've got vendor management, databases and other databases and systems. You have the payment flow, depending on if you have a tool you're already using for parts of that, all the way to the end, or also bank account validation tools. We also have a way that we do that we enable with our tool. So we layer on top of all of those. So think about those like they're siloed systems, but then we have the way that we've built our product to be able to integrate on top of that, so that we can aggregate all of that and analyze it together. And then we use the beauty of our AI engine to be able to make sense of that and show those flags, create that baseline, and then show the anomalies and deviations. I know that doesn't go into too much the nuts and bolts, because I don't want to speak to the actual...
No, that's fine.
How things plug into each other, because that really gets under the hood. But yeah.
No, that helps a lot more. Thank you for that. And actually, I want to pick on one thing you said, actually, which kind of mirrors one of the blog posts you've got on your site around, why isn't bank account validation enough? Because initial thoughts would be, well, if I'm paying, US Steel 50 grand a month and they change their bank details, and on the bank side, it has to verify that the new account is also US Steel. Why isn't that validation enough? Because even if somebody else emails somebody in accounts that's fraudulent, for example, surely it would protect them on that side.
Yeah, so there's so many interesting things that we've seen. So one of the cases that is really compelling was we saw a fraudster opened a bank account under the same beneficiary name, all the same details and everything, but just at the same bank, but just changed the bank account number and said like, hi, I'm the bank, or rather, I'm the company, and we're opening another bank account, blah, 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 blah. And somehow they were able to get through without any questions to open this account. And then they did the piece that I described before, where they emailed their client and said, hi, we've changed our bank account. Here's the new information. And because the company saw, oh, well, it's at the same bank, it's under the same name, so it must be owned by that same company. Why would they think differently, right? So that's kind of one way you can get around like traditional bank account validation, because it's all the same except the numbers change, but because it's at the same bank, it's under the same name, all of that stuff is the same. You wouldn't be the wiser, and you'd think, well, how would they be able to open that type of an account at a bank, right? If they weren't the real person. And then it turns out that the company, the vendor, didn't have any idea that bank account actually existed because it was owned fully by the fraudster. So there's all these nuanced ways that you can go around that and be able to kind of circumvent that callback procedure. And even the callback procedure, like let's say someone sends you the note, like I described before, Sasha, whatever vendor, sends you a note and says, hi, please update our bank account information in your system and whatnot. We have an invoice that needs to be paid. what are you going to do? Call back Sasha on her number and her signature, which clearly she's hijacked the email already. Now you're calling Sasha. Like, you might not be calling Nancy because she's gone, or at least you think she's gone. So you're going to call Sasha, but that's the fraudster anyway. So they're going to answer the phone. So there's a lot of things about this callback procedure. And I've gone through this before, I'll be honest, where I got so nervous. This was a past job about potential fraud, and luckily it wasn't, but I went and called like 3 different people at the company to be really sure, because I was a little bit suspicious that something was going on, and luckily it was fine in the end. But not a lot of people are going to go and try and call 3 different people they were in touch with at a vendor, right? So yeah, if that answers your question, it's not so much that it's not going to work every time. Like, bank account validation is really good, I would say, most of the time. It's that fraudsters are really sneaky, and there are these corners that they can take advantage of to then be able to create that bank account that can get around the traditional bank account validation. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to touch on is how your software helps with simply errors. So duplicate payments, overpayments, late or lost or wrong payments. And again, I would say, how is a company's existing procedures not going to pick up on that stuff regularly? And how does your software help?
That's a great question. The best example I'll give is always with duplicate payments, because those are really the trickiest ones, and they're the most common. So that stat you gave of like 1 to 3% losses from errors on budgets, that most of that is actually due to duplicate payments. And so here's what typically happens is that you might have the vendor submits a payment, it gets uploaded into an ERP, or the information is entered into whatever database. Then a little time goes by and maybe there's a stall in it getting paid. The vendor sends the invoice again, and it's completely accidental. They just assume, oh, maybe it didn't get paid yet, let's resend it. And then another person uploads it to the ERP, and then suddenly you've got 2 invoices in the flow. You see where I'm going with this. And now both of them end up getting paid, right? And then that causes a number of problems. Mainly because when you're reconciling this later, now you've got an overpayment there, right? Now you've paid that vendor twice. Like, do you take a refund from the vendor? Do you use it as a credit for the next month that they provide a service? How are you going to be recording, right? And so then that causes all sorts of challenges, but then maybe you don't catch it and it only gets caught at a recovery audit later. So there's all sorts of things that ends up happening like that. So duplicate payments are really the biggest one. Gosh, I'm trying to remember what the stat was, but it was really something shocking, where it was a very high percentage of invoices are duplicates. Not that they're paid out, but that are received. And so the way that our system catches duplicates is that we can read all of the information on an invoice, both what you see and what's underneath. And so then we can see if you upload, 2 of the same invoices into the ERP within, let's say, a week apart or whatever, and they're put into a payment flow, our system's going to flag, like, first of all, hey, that's interesting. You usually don't pay this vendor more than once a month. Now you've got 2 invoices within the course of a week. Okay, let's flag that. Like, let's just make a note of that. Maybe it's just an extra service they provided, no big deal. Maybe it's a problem. Then we'll look at the amount. The amount's the exact same. It's within 1 week of each other. That's interesting. Then it'll look at the payment information and the number on the invoice. Okay, the date is the same. The number is the same. All of this other information. This is clearly a duplicate invoice that was already submitted a week ago, but then someone uploaded it twice. Okay, so then we flag it for review. And we say, okay, it looks like you have 2 of the same invoice that are in for payment. Do you really want to pay these? And we'll stop it there, so that then it's stopped for review, and that the person in the payment approval process can take a look and see, okay, yes, these are actually the same invoice, or this is 2 separate invoices that somehow got marked incorrectly.
Yeah.
So that's how we detect that.
Excellent stuff. I want to talk at a high level about your solution, because I would love to talk to you for hours if I could. You've got some great stories, I'd imagine. So I'll just go through the sort of 5 modules so for anyone's listening. So payment approval workflow, which I started mentioning earlier.
Yeah.
SOX compliance, so complying with regulations and avoiding violations. Then 3 and 4 are kind of linked together. You've got vendor onboarding, and vendor lifecycle management. So that's very important when you stop dealing with somebody altogether, I guess. And then lastly, you've got a claims fraud engine, which helps your insurance customers or insurance companies that are your customers. So does that cover everything? Have I missed anything there?
Yeah, so those are the primary modules for sure. But like I mentioned with bank account validation, we consider that as part of like the vendor onboarding and vendor management. When you're onboarding a vendor, you want to verify their bank account information. So that feature is included in there. So we certainly do that as well. So it's, each of these I would say are buckets, which with a lot more inside them. Outside of that. But yes, that covers them, the primary modules, in addition to obviously the core product of payment security, which is the baseline, the fingerprint, the detecting the deviations and anomalies in the process. That's really our core product.
So when one of your customers has your software, do they have a dashboard, and I suppose different employees will be able to see different things in those dashboards? Is that kind of how it works on the user end?
Yes. So we do have a dashboard, and you can see, you could see and manage all of your invoices and payments in there and your payment cycles. It's full flexibility. So the people that you want to have whatever access to it or not, and what they can see and visibility, it's, can all be configured and customized within the platform and the dashboard.
Great stuff. So now the challenging bit, I want you to talk about one popular or getting more popular amongst criminals is the supply chain attack. And in case anybody listening doesn't know what that is, it's where a criminal would attack another company that's supplying the target organization and actually trying to get into your company that way through the back, sort of through some kind of back channel. And also so first of all, how does your software work in those scenarios? And also kind of similar would be the insider collusion, because employees are the ones that know all the loopholes inside a company, not necessarily all of them, but a lot of them. And again, how would your software detect that?
So really, the business email compromise example I gave before is great for that, because that's really one of the most common you see, is that they attack the email of a smaller agency that works with a large company to then gain access to the systems of that company, or at least to the email conversation, watch the email conversation and intercept where they can, and cut out the people that are real, and then, the Sasha and Nancy example I gave. So that's a really great example of that. And we catch that because we monitor the conversation, if they actually compromise the actual email of the employee, like a typical BEC, then we can see if there's a change in tone, and suddenly there's the urgency of needing to pay the second invoice, or no, the invoice was wrong, that's actually twice the amount and you need to upload it now and pay it tomorrow, and all of that. And so we can see all of those, that type of tone in the communication that's suddenly shifted. We can see those, again, deviations. So that's a great way to see the supply chain, is typically in the communication piece and in the invoices that they're sending. So are the invoices the same? Do they look like past invoices that they've sent, right? And so we really look at that very closely, or our system, it analyzes all of those indicators and it looks at that closely. So that would be on the supply chain, just a couple of examples there. There's certainly a lot more nuance we could go into. On the internal collusion side, this gets really interesting, because it is, I call it the Insidious insider. I think there's a blog post on our site to that effect, because they are very sneaky and they are very smart, because as you mentioned, they know the systems, they know how it works, they know the process, they know that Bob is not seeing what John did and approving this without that, and they know who has access to what system. And so there's a number of ways we can do that. So in this case, we can see, but because we layer into and integrate into all these different systems within the B2B payment process, we're able to see who uploaded that invoice into the ERP or entered in the information. And oh, look, this person over here, they came in later and they changed the banking details. And then they changed them back after the payment went through. We can see those nuances. So if someone came in and did exactly what I described, someone, person A uploads an invoice, then person B, the insidious insider, they come and they make a change, wait for the payment cycle to run, they come back, change it back, and there you go. We can see that those changes happen. Then it's like, wait a minute, what just happened here? They're doing something they shouldn't be doing. We can also enforce controls within these different systems to be able to say, like, does this person really need this much access in this system? Should they be able to even make any changes to banking information for vendors? Probably not, depending on their level, right? And enforcing segregation of duties, so you don't have one person doing, everything and not, just being able to go rogue and do that off the radar. So hopefully those examples give you a little bit of a sense on some of the indicators that we can kind of be able to respond to. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You're basically looking at audit logs, I suppose, of some kind where you can track all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. It reminds me, when you said separation of duties, it reminds me of that case. There was a lady in the States, she worked at a council somewhere, and for decades she was the treasurer. She was approving the transactions and submitting them as well or something. And basically that county or that town, for years and years couldn't have new swimming pools or this or that for the town.
Oh, man, yeah.
And only because somebody, when she was on holiday, questioned it, they exposed it all,
Yeah, one of the stories I saw recently is just one of those facepalm moments is when you had the head of internal compliance as well as like finance was stealing money internally, and you're just thinking, gosh, it's also the same person who's supposed to make sure this certain thing doesn't happen is the one that's also taking advantage and knows how the system works to be able to manipulate it. So it's really, they come in all flavors for internal collusion.
You must see some crazy stuff at your company. We've talked about quite a lot there in a short space of time. Is there anything that you wanted to get across, for companies who really ultimately just want to sell more, convert more of their customers, or reduce their costs?
No, I mean, we touched on a lot. I really appreciate really kind of being able to have a conversation looking holistically at everything is really great, because one of the things we do, or not that I worry about, or that I've seen, is that often people think like, oh, we just need a point solution for bank account validation or for vendor onboarding or vendor management. And it's like, actually, you have to think about all of it together, because you can't because again, if you keep siloing the processes, that's feeding into the problem. So just getting that point across is really great. Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, I've enjoyed talking about kind of all the different corners of our product that we've done. That we've been building.
Great. It'd be good if you could talk about some case studies.
Two of our biggest clients that we talk about a lot are Colgate, Palmolive, CNA Insurance. Certainly Colgate, I spent a lot of time talking to them over there. We've had a long relationship with them, and they're really, really big supporter of ours, and really, really smart people and very strong security team and financial processes. And so that case study, we started talking to them a while ago, and what was really interesting was we were able to run a POC with them, so proof of concept, which is what we do with everyone that we talk to. So, every company, we want to be able to show and deliver value immediately, and so we like to do a POC early on just to show them, like, let's see if we can detect any errors or issues in the past, and we can at least show you the whole story, and we can show the story. So we had a really great moment with Colgate where we were able to sit with the team and kind of really go through and show them the product, and they could see the value immediately, because they are a really good example of a company that can benefit from our type of product, which is hundreds of thousands of vendors, thousands upon thousands of invoices, thousands upon thousands of payment cycles, but they do not have 100,000 people in their accounts payable department, right? That would be impossible. So they could immediately see the value of saying, like, you know what, we need to have a way to provide some automation and reduce the manual effort, but then also provide this detection, like AI-driven detection, but with zero false positives. And so that was something that really, I had a great conversation with their head of security there, where he said he was very impressed, was the fact that, when we flag something that's real. We're not just flagging something, then you check and you're like, no, it's just nothing, whatever. And that's really important because especially IT people, security people, but finance people as well, no one wants to waste their time looking into something that isn't real. So that was something very exciting for them, was like, oh, this is great. It's not going to add more time into review and all of that. It's actually going to just catch the things we need to look at. So that's been a really exciting partnership. And it's also been with them that they've really helped us to think more strategically about how we extend the logic of our product to also address errors. We were doing that kind of as a side thing, like, oh yeah, we deal with fraud and errors because that's easy to catch. But then they were the ones that told us, like, this is a really interesting, compelling area that you need to kind of examine more closely, because that's really where that's where the other half of the value comes from. It's not just fraud. So that's been a big part of that case study, has also been developing that area with them and growing that area.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine with those guys, I mean, they're dealing with millions of physical items a year, shipping them all over the world. I mean,
it's very complex business, and you're dealing with a lot of vendors and suppliers all over the world. I mean, that's, there's high complexity there. So, yeah.
Excellent. You partly answered my next question in terms of if a customer wants to get started with you guys, how's the best way? So you mentioned proof of concept, which is great. And how long would it take to deploy a solution typically with your clients? Because they might do it stage by stage, I suppose, rather than go all in at once.
So, before we talked about how the solution is modular, so they don't have to deploy every single module. Of course, there is the core module, payment security, and typically all of our customers they'll deploy more than one module because they'll understand the kind of end-to-end approach, and so they won't just have the payment security. They'll want also payment flows, or maybe the vendor onboarding, and maybe the management as well, vendor management, lifecycle management. So with that, like it's whatever they want, right? We try and make it customizable and very flexible for them. For our POC, we are very proud of the fact that we can get up and running very quickly. And so we can actually start calibrating it within a week to start gathering data and start showing the historical data. So we get access to whatever, you don't want to give us access to your live systems. That's fine. Just give us a data dump in the past year, past 2 years. We'll use that to calibrate our system to then start building that baseline for the vendors. And then we can look to see if there was an incident or where there were suspicious signals that would have indicated an incident would happen or whatever. And then within the second week, we can already provide an analysis of that. So we've been able to do that for clients, and it's been great because in some cases we've, I can't name the client, but where we showed them in the second week an incident that was a fairly large amount of money on an attempted fraud, and the security team over there didn't believe us. They said, like, not that they didn't believe it didn't happen. They couldn't believe that we pulled together the entire timeline perfectly. Something that took them 3 months as a team to pull together and be able to dissect when it happened. We were able to show it after looking at their data for 1 week, which was really great. Yeah. And so that was very cool where, you have a head of security saying, like, yeah, no, we don't believe, like, this isn't possible. You must have broken into some computer and gotten our PowerPoint presentation to the CIO, because this is absolutely spot on. All the dates and everything, where everything happened, the BEC, when the person hacked the email of the vendor, when the invoice was sent, when this went through this payment cycle, like the whole thing. So yeah, so it's really great to see that we can pull that quickly,
So would I be right in saying there's nothing really comparable to you guys in the marketplace? Because you did mention point solutions before is kind of the only alternative. Is that right? So
you can, arguably, there's others out there that are going to say they do the same thing or that they do similar things. The way I look at it in terms of our product is we really take a full end-to-end approach. We use that word a lot, but in terms of thinking about all the pieces and not just focusing on one or two. So yes, there are some solutions out there that might do more than just a point solution, like bank account validation and one or two other things, or they're focused on vendor management, vendor onboarding, and that piece. But in terms of really having that full view that we do, there really isn't, we don't consider there to be competition out there, also because we provide such flexibility where we don't force you to change your process. So we call it your process, your way. You decide how you want to do it. You decide how you want to configure it, fully customizable. So that level of flexibility is unique to the market.
And how do you charge customers? Is it typically sort of per user sort of seat or annual pricing, just at a very high level?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. At a very high level, we're looking at volume of invoices and payments and that area. Because, you could have 100 people that are approving things or 5, but you have the same number, you have 2 million invoices you're paying a year or 100,000 invoices you're paying a year. But so you don't want to focus on seats, right? It's really more about the volume of payments and transactions that we are protecting. Yeah.
Excellent. So if people want to get started with you folks, your website is trustmi.ai. So that's trustmi.ai.
Right.
And I'd love to ask you, what are your company's goals / predictions in the next 6 to 12 months? Would be great to hear.
Yeah. So it is a really exciting time in terms of what's happening with the generative AI, right? And so we've seen, actually, you'll like this, you like some sexy stories. A recent one where a company in Hong Kong, a guy in the accounting team was duped by a deep fake of the CFO, a deep fake video of the CFO at his company, and he ended up wiring $25 million to a fraudster who had leveraged a deep fake video and of him, not just the CFO, but other executives. So that was a really big story in February. So this is real, and generative AI is accelerating the development of it, the evolution of it. It's getting smarter, it's getting better, and it's getting easier to use at scale. So that means all of this to say that the need for this type of product that we have, and for really thinking intentionally about securing your business payments and being strategic about that, is an even bigger imperative. And so we're seeing that in the market, that there's a big interest in that from treasury teams, accounts payable teams, finance teams. There have been a couple of things that are also raising a lot of awareness about this type of solution is, or in general, kind of AI tech to fight bad AI, if you will. So we had a ruling last summer from the SEC where all public companies now have a very specific way that they have to report cyber attacks and cyber incidents that happen, right? And so any sort of cyber attack that impacts your payments, obviously that would be included in that umbrella. And so as someone in the finance team or the head of finance of one of these large companies, do you really want to have to tell your shareholders that something happened? No. So let's be proactive and find a system that can help avoid this so we can protect that process so we don't have to worry about any cyber attacks on it, right? Also, the CPA exam is getting much more focused on technologies for finance people. And so that's another strong indicator showing that they actually changed the exam as of this year to focus more on kind of like technologies as a baseline that finance teams need to use. So what we're seeing in the next, 12, 24 months or 6 to 18 months, however you want to look at it, we're really seeing this evolution in the finance team of becoming more technologically and security focused and fluent. Where you're really going to see more of this imperative of, oh, I get it. This is why it's so important to leverage technologies, especially AI, to protect this very vulnerable process of paying other companies, of paying vendors. So we're really starting to see that interest accelerate. Even within the past 6 to 8 months, people coming to us saying like, we've had an incident. We're seeing this happen more frequently. We just had an employee that had to deal with maybe not a deep fake to the level of what I described previously, but we're starting to see some really sophisticated ways that these fraudsters are trying to get people to pay the wrong person. So we're definitely seeing that interest, but also the knowledge and understanding of why it's important is increasing in the market. So that's a really good sign.
Yeah, even at a personal level, I mean, if you grew up in an English-speaking country like we did, the classic check is grammar and punctuation and things to detect dodgy characters emailing you. But with ChatGPT, that goes away completely now.
But at the same time, not everyone, even a real person, doesn't have perfect grammar. So you never know, how would you be able to know if that person, suddenly if they start sending an email that's in perfect grammar using all the proper syntax and everything, wouldn't that kind of raise an eyebrow too? Because then that could be exactly. So it goes both ways. So it's very tricky.
Yeah. I did read a funny story the other day that some fraudsters that they're copying the prompt into the scam emails so that you can actually see them they have written, please create a letter that says this, and then they put that in with the scam letter as well.
Oh, good. That's just working too quickly. That's sloppy work.
Yeah,
exactly.
Fraud at scale.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Is there a chance that customers can potentially meet you? Are you doing any conferences or anything like that?
Yeah, so we do attend a lot of different types of conferences. We will be at Quartz Connect at the end of this week, early next week in Vegas. So that's a great event with really senior finance leaders who are looking for technologies that can address their biggest challenges. And so there's a lot of interest in B2B payments and automation, cybersecurity. And so we're participating there to talk to a lot of those folks. Also, there's accounts payable, procure to pay, APP2P in May from the 19th to the 21st. That's organized by IOFM, and we'll be exhibiting there. And that'll be down in Florida. So we're looking forward to meeting a lot of accounts payable people there.
There really is a conference for everything in the States. I never thought there'd be an accounts payable conference.
I know. And it's a really interesting conference. I mean, it's also procure to pay, but it's a very niche area, which is why we're excited to be speaking about AI, actually, for exactly this, because that's something we really want to talk a lot about with accounts payable people and finance people is AI. And there's a hunger for it. They're very interested in it. So.
Great stuff. Well, thanks so much.
I've
absolutely hammered you on this show. So I really appreciate you firing back the answers as you have. So I'm going to finish with something lighter. It would be great to hear from you, some great advice you received in your career, perhaps, or just what you're reading or watching or listening to.
So is this related to work or related to anything?
Could be related to anything.
Okay, well, good advice. I received it both from my sister, but then also from one of my favorite bosses in the past, who both said to me in different ways, when you're thinking about relationships, friends, in work, obviously with employees and managers and whatnot, or family, relationships are 50-50. So it's not just a two-way street. We always hear that, but it's 50-50. There's only so much you can do. So if you're trying to go 80% and it's not working, it's not always on you. Or if you're just doing 20%, obviously it's going to fail. So, and that made me think a lot about how the behavioral dynamics between me and the people around me in my life, and sort of how I build my relationships. It's like, I always think 50-50. Are they meeting me halfway? Am I meeting them halfway? And so that's been something that's stuck with me throughout my career, actually, as well. As for what I do on the side, or my side hustle, I'm actually a professional violinist on the side. So I moonlight playing concerts. Yes, a classical violinist. It's sort of my Zen thing that I do when I'm not thinking about payments and fraud. So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's a great instrument. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Juliana. I really appreciate your time. And all the best to you in the future and to your company.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was great speaking with you and meeting you. And thanks for having me on today.
Cheers. Take it easy.
Okay. Take care. Bye.